Live.
Hey guys! Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes. Let a few of you join you. Thank you so much for giving up your Thursday night to be with us. We'll be covering all sorts of things. This is Ivy. I'm James. And I've been at HeadCount for 5 years. Ivy, you've been at HeadCount for
a year.
I've gotten used to the craziness. Anyways, we'll get things started soon. So basically, our friends at FELN are here. We'll talk about them in a second. If you have any questions, concerns, anything like that, we'll be talking about how the marches are going to work specifically, how to conduct pen and paper voter registration, and then later we will have a question and answer time for anyone who has any questions that need answering. A little bit about HeadCount. HeadCount's a nonpartisan, nonprofit voter registration organization. We've been doing Voter Reg since about 2004. We primarily do most of our work at concerts, music festivals, all that jazz, but generally what we care about is empowering young people, empowering old people, just ensuring that more people are participating in the political process. We typically are at about 1,000 events a year. Since 2004, we've registered 500,000 people to vote. And generally, we're always looking for new ways to get people participating in the process and speaking their mind. We're a nonpartisan organization. We care about people speaking up and having the tools they need to enter the conversation and generally just be a part of American democracy. Last year, we made a lot of efforts to essentially work on providing information about local election alerts, stuff like that, so that people know about their local elections, because elections are happening all the time. And it's important people are voting in those small elections because your vote matters so much. And when an election has, 200, 300 votes, deciding some important decision or picking some candidate, that can make all the difference, and your participation can make all the difference.
So we are here to empower voters, and we're not here to push any political views or any party or candidate.
So we'll get started in about 1 minute. I want to just give a quick disclaimer. FELN is here to provide general guidance and information about the rules. FELN is not your lawyer. They're not here to give any legal advice, that sort of thing. But if you do have questions, the folks at FELN are going to do their best to respond in the comments. So if you need a question that needs answering really quickly, that's going to be your place to go. That's your place to go. So I'm going to pass it off to Ivy to talk about what the experience is going to be like on Saturday.
So on Saturday is the March for Our Lives. HeadCount will have volunteers at 30 cities across the country, and they will be registering people to vote at these marches. If we are not in your city, there's most likely another voter registration organization that is there and can register you to vote. And if you would like to sign up to volunteer, you can sign up at headcount.org/marchforourlives. And if you would like to learn a bit more about what we're doing, you can also find out at headcount.org/marchforourlives.
And if you need to register to vote, you can go to headcount.org and register to vote right now. We have an online voter registration system, so you can get that done and join us as registered voters. What we're going to cover, this is about pen and paper registration. There's all sorts of other online sources for registering people to vote, but we'll be talking about how good old pen and paper works. So, the most important thing that's going to be in your possession on Saturday is this clipboard.
Right here.
This is your voter registration toolkit. And it's really important that if you're volunteering with us, that you hold on to this clipboard for dear life, because you'll be collecting voter registration forms with it, and it's important that at the end of your time registering voters on Saturday, you return it to your team leader so that they can ensure the forms are properly processed. Keep in mind, these marches were organized fairly last minute. They are all coming together very quickly, but there's still a lot of question marks that remain about march routes, how large these marches are going to be. So bear with us, and just be prepared to have, there's going to be a little bit of confusion on Saturday, and it's just to be aware of.
And if you have any questions at all, you can contact us at info@headcount.org, and we will do our best to answer your questions. And of course, on Saturday, you will have someone on site that you can ask questions to.
And if for whatever reason you're out there on Saturday, you can't find your team leader, anything like that, we have a hotline that will be set up only on Saturday. And that hotline, that number is 202-547-1334. 202-547-1334. And that hotline, you can direct a lot of questions there. If you need to rush and you can't find someone to turn in your clipboard to, if someone asks you a really complicated question that you don't have answers to, that's the number to call. Should be in the description of this video, and your clipboard also has that number listed as well.
It's also important to note that that hotline will only be operating on Saturday, so do not call it at any other time. But if you do have questions, again, you can contact us via email at info@headcount.org.
So let's talk about this awesome clipboard. Ivy, do you mind flipping it around? On your clipboard, you'll be receiving a few things. First, this is a national voter registration form. This form can register people to vote in almost every state in the country. There will be a few situations where some of you will be at marches where you are using state forms, but we're going to be covering this form in this training, and your local team leader will help you go through the state form in the training on Saturday. So in addition, on this clipboard, few other information resources that make the process really easy. This is info about pre-registration. Not a lot of people know this, but in some states you can pre-register to vote as early as 16. There are a lot of opportunities to basically get ready so that once you do turn 18, you're on the voter rolls, ready to go, ready to participate. So this guide will walk you through it and let you know what states you can pre-register folks to vote in. Next, this resource details the requirements by state for voter registration. It's something that's really important to show to any individuals who is interested when you are having them fill out the form, and when they're filling out, when they're actually signing the form. It's important they review this. We'll get into that a little bit more later. And finally, on this clipboard, we have this. This is our cheat sheet, as we call it. Cheating's not normally okay, but what this helps you through is state-by-state rules about voter registration, requirements for if you need to provide the last 4 digits of your social security number, state driver's license, something else, and any specific rules as well. And it's designed to do this as simple as possible, so that you don't have to worry about shuffling through paper after paper of rules.
And this sheet also is it's quick, quick to look at. It has all your answers right here. Of course, you'll have other questions. You can ask your team leader about those. But for the most part, when it comes to filling out the form, you can check this sheet right here.
Ivy, tell us about how this whole form works.
So, this is the National Voter Registration Form, as we just said. This form, when you are registering for the first time, you're going to be filling out the top half of the form.
And if I may interrupt you for a second, you guys, if you can't see what this form looks like, there should be a link to a photo of the form in the description so that you can follow along at home, because I know you guys are all anxiously wondering how this all works.
Yeah, so at the top, we have the top 2 boxes. These boxes, you check them to let the voter, to make sure that you're stating on the form that you are 18 years or older. Of course, if you're pre-registering, you will check that you are not 18 years or older. And the other one is to prove that you are a citizen of the United States. So on this form, next comes your name, which is pretty self-explanatory. The next line is address, your current address. And then after that, we go into your date of birth. And then we get to the boxes that are a little more complicated. ID number. ID number is going to change based on whatever state you're registering someone to vote in. So make sure to consult a cheat sheet. Also, your TL will go over, your in-state rules during the Saturday training. We also have boxes for choice of party and race or ethnic group. Those as well are also different by state. They are all indicated on the cheat sheet. After that is a signature, and then you sign the date, so the day that you're registering. So if you're registering someone on Saturday, they're going to sign 3/24/18.
So there's some really common mistakes that people make, and it's really important that when you're registering people to vote, you're walking them through this form every step of the way. Obviously people are putting their sensitive information there, so you don't have to, be within 2 inches of the form as it's being filled out, but it's important to let people know, hey, you're going to want to check those top 2 boxes. People often get their date of birth confused with today's date. It seems obvious, but when you're filling out paperwork, there's something funky that happens where people get these 2 confused. So it's really important that when you see their pen is down at box 4, let them know, all right, that's your date of birth. And then once they're signing the form, it's really important that you let them know that it's, 3/24/18, which will be the day of the marches. It will save people time. It's just really important to do, and it will ensure that those kind of common mistakes don't happen. When people are signing that box, it's really, really important that you let them know that they should consult their state-by-state rules, which is provided either here or your team leader will have it as well. It's just important that you give them an opportunity to review that so that they can sign off on the form. Did you talk about address changes?
I did not, but I'll get to it now. So if you are not registering for the first time, but you're updating your name or address, you will be filling out the second half of the form in addition to the top half. So when filling out a change of name or address, make sure that you put all of your most current information on the top half up here. And then on the bottom half is where you'll indicate your previous information. So, for example, if you've changed your name, you'll put your current name up here and your previous name down here.
And it's really important that people know that you have to update your address anytime you change permanent residence. And we find that that's not very well known, and it's super important to know that that you're updating your address and every time you move. And if, for example, you're a student voter, it's really important that you update your address to where you're currently residing. That could be, in theory, a dorm room. Stuff like that. Another thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of misinformation out there about potential people with felonies and voting in quite a few states. Actually, all the states kind of differ on this rule. with felon voting. Some states will basically, some states will let you vote in jail. Some states won't let you vote even if you got a felony 20 years ago. So it's important you talk to your team leader about specific felon voting rules, because some people actually might be eligible to register to vote, and they might not even know it. So it's that's really important. Let's talk a little bit about pre-registration. So at these marches, we anticipate there's going to be a lot of young people, a lot of people who are 16 to 18, and depending on what state you're in, depending on what state they're registering in, it's important that you know the rules about pre-registration. Once again, that's on this nice form right here. There's a large number of states where you can pre-register to vote as early as 16. So if someone walking past you and you're like, hey, are you registered to vote at your current address? And they're like, I'm 16, I can't do that yet. If you were, say, for example, in California, actually you could. So it's important to know. It's all detailed out here. We try and make it as easy as possible. One last thing that's really important. It's really important that the individual is completing these forms. You don't want to pre-fill out any information. You don't want to, check a box for them as they're walking away. They have to fill out the form completely, and that's why it's so important that you make sure that they're filling it out properly so you don't have to run after them to make the smallest mistake. And the smallest mistake can invalidate the form. So it's really important that you are not altering the form. The only person who can write on the form is the person registering to vote. Even a scribble down there, that's not something you should do. So, let's talk about best practices.
Right. So, when it comes to registering people to vote, and you're volunteering with HeadCount, we all the time are approaching complete strangers. And it's definitely a skill to learn how to canvass. So we like to open with the line, are you registered to vote at your current address? This addresses people who have registered to vote before and need to update their information, and it also addresses people who have never registered to vote. To canvass, you want to make sure you make eye contact with the person, you're smiling, you're happy. We also, for our clipboards, they double as little billboards. So when we're approaching someone, we may hold up the clipboard like this, so that when we're saying, are you registered to vote at your current address, they can also read it, and they'll know that they can go to you if they need to register to vote. It's also important that if you are a volunteer and you're going out into a massive crowd, one thing you can do is to go with a group. If you are in a group and you're approaching another group, it'll seem like, a much more friendly interaction, and they'll feel, they're going to be
more receptive to the process. Another thing that is really, really helpful is don't hold your clipboard out like this. People are scared of paperwork. This looks a lot more intimidating than it is. If you walk someone through this Voter Reg form, it should only take about a minute for them to fill out. And that's, just a minute. But this looks like, oh no, I'm going to be sitting here for 5 minutes dealing with this. I don't want to do this now. So use this nice pretty clipboard. It is a lot more compelling than a big stack of paperwork. I will give that back to you. It's really important to know that you are the information source. You are the Voter Reg expert there. So you shouldn't take any information for any other you shouldn't take any information for granted. Not a lot of people know they have to update their voter registration when they update their address. Not a lot of people know that there are opportunities to pre-register to vote if they're under 18. There's a lot of myths out there, and hopefully by this training and the training you have on Saturday, you'll be able to really, really be a resource for people out of the march. It's also important to know, like, a lot of people at these marches, they're very plugged into politics, but there might be people walking past. There might be people who stumbled into the march. Those people might be unregistered or not registered to vote, or might need to update their registration. So just remember that. It's really important. And it's a lot of information that you're going to have to retain, but once you kind of get in the groove, it's going to make all the difference in the world. Let's talk about a few other tips that are going to make sure that your experience on Saturday and in general registering voters is an enjoyable one. This sounds really obvious, but I'm guilty of making this mistake all the time. Drink water. No matter how cold it is, no matter how hot it is, drink water and drink more water than you think you need. It's really easy to get dehydrated when you're registering people to vote. It's a lot of hard work, and so just please drink water. I recommend bringing a backpack, maybe having some snacks in the backpack, granola bars, things you can eat on the run so that you're maintaining high energy, you're in a good mood. I'm someone who, if I don't eat fairly often, I get really grumpy, and that doesn't make for a good experience for the people I'm registering to vote. So high energy, don't become a voter registration zombie where you're just kind of like slowly like, hey, are you registered to vote? Because you haven't had like any water in hours. It's really easy to get in that, so just remind yourself to drink water. I'm sure a lot of you have some really awesome political t-shirts that have some message you really care about. That's something that you have to leave at home. We are nonpartisan, and any political messaging while wearing HeadCount, no matter how nonpartisan you think it is really not okay. You'll be wearing HeadCount gear, either laminates, t-shirts, a hat, your clipboard, so you don't want to mix that with your political views. And it's important to reiterate that while you're out there, you are representing HeadCount. You're not representing your own political views. You're representing this idea of empowerment, an engagement with young people, old people, and just putting a little bit of more positivity into politics. That's all we care about. We want more people participating. And if someone approaches you and is like, hey, who do you guys work for? Or, you know, who are you voting for? Things like that. It's important that you say, I'm just registering people to vote right now. I'd be happy to have a discussion with you about my political views some other time. And usually they'll, you know, move on to another argument. And if for whatever reason you do feel uncomfortable by the interaction, it's also okay to walk away. People can get a little goofy, so it's just important to be mindful of that. And in general, it's important to really be proactive and not reactive. It's important to approach people rather than wait for them to approach you. You will get people to approach you at an event like this. But there are a lot of people who don't even know they're eligible to register to vote yet, or don't know they have to update their information. So it's your responsibility to go up to those complete strangers with a smile on your face and say, hey, are you registered to vote at your current address? And it's intimidating at first, but ultimately what is really important to know is that on Saturday you should do role-playing with your volunteers, with your fellow volunteers. Get the cobwebs shaken off, get those nerves out of your system, and get that practice that's really important, you know, so that you can, as soon as the marches start, as soon as you're out there registering people to vote, you've already registered people to vote. You've already experienced what it's like to register people to vote. And I bet a lot of you actually already have experience registering voters. But do remember, Saturday morning, make sure you role play and kind of go through the process of registering your peers to vote. Don't actually register them to vote, but, you know, go get your P's and Q's in line. And, you know, it's just a great way to come out the gate strong. So it's really important that you're ready to respond to a few questions, a few, general things people might ask. One of the most common things we encounter is, why should I vote? It's probably pretty obvious to everyone here why they should vote, right? You'd be surprised how many people don't see any reason to vote. And keeping in mind that we are nonpartisan, it means that the conversation we have to have with folks like this to convince them to register to vote is a little bit more nuanced. I always point to close elections. Over the past couple years, since the most recent presidential election, there have been a ton of elections that have been decided by a handful of votes. There was a state house election in Virginia that was decided on a coin flip. Your vote matters. And a lot of people also don't, they might think of voting as voting for a politician or an individual, something like that. There are a lot of states that have ballot initiatives, a lot of municipalities that have ballot initiatives where you can vote on an issue you care about. And a lot of local elections have a great impact on your daily life. So, speak from your own experience, remain nonpartisan, but be ready to kind of have an answer for people who ask, oh, why should I vote? That's pretty much everything I wanted to cover, that we wanted to cover in this training. I will open it up to questions in a couple minutes. But it's really, really important to know that I think that every single one of you on this Facebook Live, every single volunteer on Saturday knows that I think you guys can all register at least 5 to 10 people each. And I think that should be your goal. And if thousands of us register 5 to 10 people each, we will have made a huge impact. We will have empowered so many people. And I know a lot of you guys are going to blow that number out of the water. And I'm just so excited to see what we can do on Saturday and really engage with people in a meaningful way. So I would like to open the floor to questions, and hopefully I have answers.
So I think a question that I've seen a lot of people ask, and I'm sure you guys have covered it already, is, so traditionally voter registration drives happen in one state. If somebody's from out of state, can you register them to vote? And what's our mechanism for doing that for those who joined late?
So, we are able to register people in almost every state in the United States of America to vote. And the way that we are able to do that is that on our clipboard, where we have our forms and all the other information we need, on the back we have a cheat sheet that is on every clipboard. And it lets you know all of the rules for each state that we can register in. So if you have any sort of, if you're unsure of how to register someone that's in a different state, you can check this cheat sheet back here, and it will tell you how to do so on a national road registration form.
And to add to that, if, say, you're at a march in California and someone from Colorado or Nevada or Oregon is at the march and they're not registered to vote, we can register them to vote even though we are in California. There are a select few states where that's a little bit more complicated, but ultimately, for the most part, as long as you have a in-state driver's license in the state you want to register in, or you know the last 4 digits of your social security number, generally that's what you got to put there. There are a few instances where states request full social, and we can get into the weeds with that, but I recommend bringing that up with your team leader because ultimately the cheat sheet will save the day. What other questions are out there?
What do we do with the forms at the end of the march?
Great question. So you'll get all your forms filled out, your hundreds and hundreds of voter registration forms, or 2 to 5, whatever number of people you register to vote. Each vote matters. each person empowered matters. So what you want to do is you want to return the clipboard with your voter registration forms to your team leader, because they will be able to process it and make sure those forms get to the state promptly and in a legal manner. So that's why you want to turn in your clipboard. If you've got loose voter registration forms for whatever reason, get them to your team leader. Your team leader needs to end up with all of them. If someone runs off with their voter registration form, that's okay, but honestly, we do all the hard work for them. People don't like mailing things anymore. We mail them. We've got a great record of ensuring that voter registration forms get processed, and if there's any mistakes that are made on the forms, we will handle them in the office. We will contact the individual. We will let them know, hey, there was an error on your form. We will send you a new form so that you can correct that mistake, and that ensures that even if there was a mistake on the form at the time, there is still an opportunity for them to fix that mistake.
Here's a very good question. So the driver's license number has to match the state they're registering in, correct?
That is correct. If you want to register to vote in, say, Kansas. Well, Kansas is complicated. If you want to register to vote in New York, but you do not have a New York state ID or driver's license, don't try and register with your New Hampshire driver's license. You can provide the last 4 digits of your social security number.
All right, here's another very good question that we might need to kind of bring that form back up for. Can we register homeless people to vote? Or how can we register homeless people to vote? Would it be via a shelter or what?
That's a very good question, and the answer is fairly long, but you can register people who are homeless to vote. There are a couple ways to do so. First and foremost, this section actually deals with people who don't have addresses, an actual address. It's a little bit different from, being homeless all the time, but another important place that people can register to vote at if they don't have a home is at a homeless shelter that they reside in, that they're a part of. So it is a lot more complicated than that, so I don't want to get on too into the weeds on that front, but yes.
And then just a quick question. How will we find the team leader? How can you get involved?
Okay, I have a 2-part answer for that. Your team leader should have been in contact with you probably in the last 24 hours, unless you haven't signed up. If you want to sign up to register voters at the marches on Saturday, you can head to
HeadCount.org/MarchForOurLives.
and someone will be in touch. If for whatever reason you signed up weeks ago and you still haven't heard anything, let us know. Contact us at info@headcount.org and we'll figure out what happened. And if you want to get involved in general as a volunteer at concerts, music festivals, more things like this, you can go to headcount.org/volunteer. It's a really wonderful experience, especially for the music lovers who are watching right now. You get to go register people to vote, and then once the headlining band hits the stage, you get to enjoy some music. So you do good and have some fun at the same time.
So do we need to check ID? Driver's license? What about other IDs for non-drivers?
Other IDs, other state-issued IDs will work. It doesn't have to be a driver's license. There is, generally, you do not have to look right at this person's driver's license. It's important that if they have their driver's license on there, that they use that rather than the last 4 of their social. And with, it's just their driver's license number or ID number. that they have to provide. We don't have to, make all sorts of photocopies. None of that happens. And so that's to answer that question. What's next?
What about people that are concerned about sharing their private information?
Great question. These are actually all great questions. So, this is a tough one. There are going to be people you encounter who do not want to give their information and won't, and that's okay. They can do it online or a preferred method. But generally, if someone's nervous, it's important to tell the HeadCount story. We've registered hundreds of thousands of people to vote. We're nonpartisan. The voter registration forms that we're collecting today are basically going right back to our offices for immediate processing. We don't lose forms at all. And we don't use forms for any other purpose than registering people to vote. You're not going to get a bunch of McDonald's, free coupons. I'm sorry for any McDonald's fans out there. Also, one thing that we forgot to cover is once you register someone to vote, it's really, really important that you hand them one of these cards, which basically it's a thanks for registering to vote card. It has our contact information on it so that if someone has an issue, concern, they know how to reach us. And it, in certain states, serves as a receipt, proof that you completed the registration, that sort of thing. It's also really good if someone has that they're concerned about sensitive information, handing them the business card, letting them know, here's how you contact us if you've got any concerns is great. It's also good if someone's like, I prefer to do it online because this will direct them to our website as well where they can register to vote online.
Can you quickly repeat how to attend the music part? Or get involved in the music part of HeadCount?
Totally. So HeadCount is at over 1,000 events a year, usually at music concerts or festivals. And you can volunteer at these concerts or festivals where you'll be registering people to vote. And if you'd like to get involved, you can go to headcount.org/volunteer.
And we work with a bunch of the major music festivals across the country, the Bonnaroos and Gov Balls and Outside Lands of the world. We also work with a range of different bands. I believe we're touring right now with, I don't even know, a huge number of bands. In presidential election year, we'll typically tour with about 100 different bands. We've toured with, Jay-Z and Beyonce. We've done the Dead and Company, Grateful Dead World. We've worked with a lot of Bass Nectar, a range of different artists, and we also have relationships with venues across the country as well. So we reach a very wide audience, and it's a great way to discover new music. I think it's how everyone kind of gets hooked on HeadCount because it's music brings people together, and the joy of music, I think, should be shared a little bit with the world of politics.
Yeah, totally.
What other questions do we have? Lots of great questions, guys.
So many good questions. Can you talk about the fact that each individual march is going to have different scenarios? They're not all going to be the same, and the team leaders are going to go over specifics individually.
Okay, so that's a great question once again. All these marches are going to be very different. At some marches, we're going to have... we're going to be static. We might be set up under a tent at a meeting place. Some of these events are more rallies than marches. And ultimately, it's your team leader who is going to provide you the exact information and nature of that. Because we're in 30 different locations on Saturday, all the rules are going to be slightly different. What we covered today will give you kind of a general idea, but it is important that you participate in the training on Saturday for the kind of specifics how the day will go. Some marches start at 10 o'clock, other marches start at 2 o'clock. So just, bear with us. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be figured out and finalized, and things will change. And your team leader will be the person to save the day if you have any questions. And ultimately, what we do know is that we're going to register a huge number of voters, reach a vast audience, and make the world and will make American democracy stronger because there'll be more voices participating.
Somebody would like to know if it's important to be on time or if they can just show up to their event to help volunteer at any point.
Good question. I would always say that it's really important to arrive at the designated training time.
Yeah, as James was just saying, it's also important that you're at the training on Saturday. There will be a lot of specifics that are specific to your location that you want to make sure you get all of that information before you go out there. Team leaders will be going over very state-specific or location-specific information. So being at the training on Saturday will be very important.
And if you can't make the training and you really still want to be a participant, ultimately I would connect with your team leader because they might be able to figure something out. And every march is different. So I would say we strongly prefer that you arrive at the call time. I know that's early for a lot of folks, but it's important because that's where you'll get all the information you need to register people to vote. But we are so grateful for all the people who signed up to volunteer, and we want to give everyone every opportunity to participate. So work it out with your local team leader.
Speaking of getting everybody to participate, is there an age limit to being a HeadCount volunteer?
There is no age limit.
Is there a youngest age?
Essentially, everyone will fill out a waiver when they get this clipboard. And on that waiver, if you are a minor and you're accompanied by a guardian, you'll be able to fill out that waiver. We do need a guardian there to sign off on that waiver. But we want people of all ages involved, and that minor waiver you just have to fill out if you're under 18 and make sure that a guardian signs it, and you'll be receiving it on Saturday morning as you check out your clipboard.
Alrighty.
All right. Any last questions? All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I'd like to thank FELN for answering all the questions I didn't see. And they are just this wonderful organization that helps support voter registration efforts and provide information and resources. So thank you. And thank you to everyone who was able to tune in. If you have any questions at all, concerns, anything like that, email info@headcount.org. If you have friends who missed this, you'll be able to watch this on Facebook, and we will be putting it on YouTube as well. And finally, if you haven't signed up to register people on Saturday to volunteer, Ivy, where do they go?
You can go to headcount.org/marchforourlives.
All right. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and I'll see everyone out there on Saturday. Have a good night, folks.
Bye.